to Radio Wasteland. Our guest tonight is Neil Gaur, and we're going to be talking truth, life, and the times of Pythagoras, an event you recently did. But first, I'd like to, get to know you and run down a little bit of what you're all about. There's a lot on your site talking about your transition. I think that's the word that you even specifically use, transition. How did you open your mind to this?
Where it really started was, well, first I was raised in London, England. I moved to California when I was 12, and I was raised in a Hindu family, right? So I followed pretty much all the, I'm Indian. I followed all the rites and rituals. I really didn't have any firm belief in anything. I just did what I was told. And then when I turned 18 and I went to college, I started doing some research and on ancient history and ancient civilizations. I was also writing a lot of poetry at that time. And you could kind of say it was like sci-fi almost, because it was about black holes, planets, extraterrestrials, just like some really fun, super esoteric poetry. And I also started researching words that I was utilizing, like ancient scriptures and black holes, like things like that. And as I started doing that, I found the Sumerian Tablets of Creation, which are one of the oldest, scriptures in the world, in which they talk about these beings that come from another planet. And also there's all these references to some advanced form of quantum physics, some awareness of the quantum world, as well as a 2-scale map of our solar system with all the planets in the right position. So that was kind of my entry that sparked my curiosity. One of the stories that I came across was the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the same story as the Noah story, but it's even further back, right? Thousands of years before, that story was even written. And when I started researching the Epic of Gilgamesh, I realized that this story was taken from almost every religion and civilization in the world and manipulated in a way to be catered to their own people. That made me realize that there is a source code, a source piece of information that all these religions pulled from. So why is it that we concentrate so much on what separates us, when just by just a little bit of research, we can find out that there's so much more that unifies us, and we're sharing a lot of the same stories. So that was in 2001, 2002. I was like 19, 20, and it kicked me down a rabbit hole. I just went into ancient scripture after ancient scriptures, the Mahabharata, the Egyptian scriptures, Mayan civilization. And as I was doing that, I was being introduced to this whole ancient alien concept that also took me down a parallel of UFOs and what's going on now with disclosure. That was kind of my introduction to it all.
It sounds like you had to hold on to your upbringing until you were 18. How did your parents react to
what I became?
Yeah.
So at first, they didn't know when I was 18, right? Because I was just in college learning all this stuff. But when I started doing it professionally in like 2006, 2008, that's when it became more like, what is all this stuff? You can't do this as a job. Then a little bit later, when my dad started realizing a lot had to do with aliens, like I remember my dad said once, "What's with all this alien stuff?" And that was like 2012. So they were okay with a lot of it because they had to do with meditation, spirituality. But when they started realizing that it was about UFOs and aliens as well, they really didn't know how to kind of quantify that, and even tried to make me like realize that I can't actually do this as a full-time job, until about 2016, when I started actually becoming self-sustained from this.
Right.
Then they got off my back and realized like, whoa, Neil's created something really great here.
That's funny that you were all concerned on like a religious level, and then in the end they're just all like, you can't pay the rent with this thing. That's what the concern ended up being.
Exactly.
So these Sumerian tablets, these are the same ones that Zecharia Sitchin translated. Now, is there the Nibiru tie?
Yeah, so they're in the scriptures, right? First, let me say about Zecharia Sitchin, there are those that don't completely agree with what he said, and that some things may have been mistranslated. But one thing for sure that we can all agree upon is that there is a talk about a different planet, a 10th planet in our solar system that had an elliptical orbit around our sun, whereas we have this orbit, it was having an elliptical orbit, and this orbit was around 3,600 years. That was pretty much the first piece of information that I came across. And then, of course, yeah, we have the Anunnaki, and we have, which a lot of people don't know, is the Igigi. There were actually two races of gods on this planet. So yeah, it does tie in with that information.
So a lot of this is that humanity's ancient origins is that we were put here. A lot of these things say as kind of a slave race. Is that?
Yeah. Well, there's two different areas of thought with this, because there is no actual text in the Sumerian scriptures that says we were slaves, but it does talk about how we were created. And so some people believe that we were created in order for those beings to incarnate into and have an earthly experience within this dimension, and that we became sentient over a period of time. Some of them believe that it was neutrally done, that they just needed some assistance mining gold for their atmosphere, and they weren't attempting to really like control us. And then we became sentient and self-aware, and then, you know, we rebelled against them. And then some believe that there were two brotherhoods within the Anunnaki. One was actually attempting to assist us and teach us, and the other was attempting to control us. So whether it's a slave race or not, I think the jury's still out there, because there is no actual information saying that we're a slave race. I feel that no matter what happened, it happened the way it was supposed to be. And in regards to if we were put here, it looks like there was an actual species of Homo hominoid on the planet at that time. And that species was actually manipulated utilizing the DNA of the beings from this planet in order to create a hybrid being, which basically became us.
Is this something that we're all discovering together, or is this something that the powers that be know?
So this is the interesting part here, and Jordan Maxwell talks about this quite a lot. So there are the two tiers of gods, the Igigi and the Anunnaki. Now we have, like, let's take it into Greek text, the gods and the demigods, the Anunnaki and the Igigi. When we take it to Indian text, we have the gods and we have the demigods, the half human, half God beings. Let's take it to the Christian text. We have the gods, and then we have the fallen angels, Anunnaki, Igigi, throughout all the scriptures, right? So the Igigi were the ones that were basically here doing the genetic experiments and helping mine the gold. The Anunnaki were the overlords that the Igigi were working for. It doesn't say that there was so much of a hierarchy, but it definitely says that there were two different beings from this planet. Now, when the gods left, when the Anunnaki left, the Igigi stayed on the planet. Now we have the fallen angels. The fallen angels followed who? Lucifer. Who's Lucifer? The angel of light, the number one fallen angel. Well, what do all these elite think that they're following? The Luciferian energy. So all these elite, well, not all of them, because there's many secret societies, but some of the core ones that have been in control for thousands of years believe that they are the offspring of the Igigi, which were the fallen angels that came from this original planet. So a lot of them think that they have direct heritage to that. And that's where now you get the reptilian conspiracy theory of that the Igigi was a reptilian race, and that these beings hybridized with humans, creating the Nephilim, right? Another Bible reference. And then the Nephilim's offsprings created the giants. Now we have the Greek reference. And eventually, after hybridization, began looking more and more like us, but maintained control over the entire world. And that's kind of the summary of how that worked.
Is your belief that the information was lost or that it was hidden?
The information was, I feel the information was definitely hidden, but at the same time, a lot of things were lost, because it's kind of both, really, because there's these cycles of times that we go into. We go through an evolution of consciousness and a devolution of consciousness. It's a 26,000 year cycle. And it seems that there's been many advanced civilizations that have existed on the planet before us. And they've gone up in consciousness, down in consciousness. When we go down, we actually end up losing a lot of our self-awareness and a lot of our information. Plus, there's been cataclysms, including conventionally accepted multiple asteroids that hit the planet around 13,000 years ago, wiping out a lot of information. So there's definitely, not all the secret societies are attempting to hide stuff, because some of them think they know, but they really don't know. Some of them don't know anything, and others of them know information and are trying to hide it. And then on top of that, there's been cataclysms, there's been a devolution of consciousness. So there's been a lot of information that we just forgot and don't know. So it's both of them.
What causes global consciousness to go down? Is it
Yeah.
negative self-feeling, a lack of connection? Is it done to us? Why would that phase change?
So there is something called the Yuga cycles, and many ancient cultures talk about this. The Greeks talk about it, the Maya talk about it, ancient Chinese scriptures, and India and beyond, right? Even the Kabbalistic texts. And they say that there's a 26,000 year cycle. And within the cycle, there's four phases. There's the Dark Ages, which is the Kali Yuga. There's the Bronze Age, which is the Dwapara Yuga. And then we have the Silver Age, and then we have the Golden Age, which is the Satya Yuga. Every single Yuga cycle that goes up is a longer period of time. So the shortest time is the Kali Yuga, which is the Dark Ages, which is a good thing. So we spend less time within the Dark Ages. This goes to the whole concept of time is not linear. Time is not even secular. Time actually ultimately is just one frequency simultaneously existing. But in the next dimension up, after linearity, we get secular time, that things go in cycles. So this whole cycle is supposed to be a matrix construct of this world in order for us to basically have these karmic experiences where we have full remembrance and forgetfulness, full remembrance, forgetfulness. And many people have speculated on the reason for this. It seems like it's almost like the video game of Earth, something that was created. Some people think that it's because we're victims to this cycle. And others believe that this cycle exists because the reason why we chose to come down to Earth is to have these phases where we forget everything so that we can remember who we truly are. That goes to the whole idea that source, consciousness, God, the universe wants to experience itself infinitely. And through experiencing itself infinitely, one of the best ways to have complete experience like that is a realm of free will where we forget our connection to the divine. So as we lower in consciousness, we forget our connection and we start gaining all these unique experiences in order for us to have the contrast of the darkness to remember what the light is. Because when you don't remember anything, you don't remember your past lives. You don't remember your extraterrestrial lives. You don't remember you're connected to source. When you don't remember that, the only way you can become spiritually enlightened again is by having the opposite experience so that you can go back there. So I believe that this cycle was created for the universe for source to experience itself infinitely. However, because we exist in this world of duality, when we get to such a lower point in consciousness, we end up putting a label on it as it's a bad experience, it's evil, it's hate, and all that stuff.
You can't have the good without the bad sort of thing. And, how do you make something be able to stand being eternal without remembering what it's like to be finite?
Exactly, man.
As it goes on, I've read enough vampire novels to know the torment of eternal living,
That's hilarious.
So where does Pythagoras fit into this?
All right. So Pythagoras, we definitely know he founder of geometry, but not really. We know him as somebody that we talk about the Pythagorean theorem the reason why we have bridges the way we do, the reason why we have arches the way we do, the way buildings are created. A lot of them have to do with Pythagoras's information that he didn't find but rediscovered. But little do a lot of people know is Pythagoras was extremely spiritual individual. Not only was he one of the first vegetarians in the Greek world, but he remembered 4 of his past lives. He would talk about them all the time. He believed he was the son of God, Apollo and his mother, and he had a miraculous birth. And he wanted to find out how he was exploring how mathematics and musical intervals could connect you to source and God. That was his whole idea. He believed mathematics was the language of the universe, and the language of the universe was in the form of music, but that music was God's voice. So as he was exploring this, he came up with musical intervals, the Western music scale. This is just like a really short amount of a 3-hour presentation I did on this, but his level of consciousness was that he wanted to teach people. He believed that we are all the soul experiencing ourselves in a human body. And he believed that everything on the planet would be in perfect resonance if it was in harmony, including the soul. So when he was doing music therapy and exploring musical intervals, he actually was attempting to figure out different harmonic frequencies that could help harmonize the soul so that we wouldn't be so violent, aggressive, and things like that. So the reason why he's connected to this whole thing is because someone that we really hold in reverence for a lot of different mathematical discoveries really was super conscious and into us evolving as a species and realizing that, music and math had a lot to do with that. And that's just basically a little bit about him right there.
It's interesting about how he appears to cross over in many of the ways that we see science and religion crossing over today.
Yes.
It's sound is an example. There was the Cuban thing. I think that got kind of disproved, but there's definitely some proof behind high pitch frequencies only annoying the young, who have good hearing.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of that goes into it. And obviously we're seeing that in marketing. And then we're definitely see it in string theory.
Right. And then there's Neo-Pythagoreanism as well. That was a resurrection of his awareness, because basically we don't have any like distinct information about him for 800 years after his death. He didn't write anything down, right? In my presentation, I did 2 slides on how he has all these similarities to the Jesus story, like all these things. It's almost like they took his life and then put it on Jesus as if it was Jesus's life. And here's a quote from Pythagoras, okay, just to show you what he really felt in regards to the soul and consciousness. He said, "And if at length, leaving behind thy body, thou dost come to the free upper air, then shalt thou be deathless, a mortal man no more." And that was about breaking the cycle and going through the cycle and the Yuga cycles I just referred to. He believed that if we lived in harmony with the earth and each other, and we didn't have so much aggression with each other, we could break the cycle of consciousness that we're stuck in this reality, and we could basically become immortal. And even his information that he came across, like a lot of people think that Pythagoras discovered the Pythagorean theorem, and some people get angry. And at the beginning of my presentation, I actually wrote 2 pages of disclaimers to not trigger people, because some people are like, no, that stuff's from Egypt, that's from Babylon. They should not be talking about Pythagorean theorem and all this stuff. But what they don't realize is Pythagoras never claimed to have found this information himself. As globalization happened, as the Western world took over, as slavery got instituted, the Neo-Pythagoreans started saying and worshiping Pythagoras and saying that it was all him, that he came up with all this stuff. But he never, ever mentioned that he came up with it all. And if you do a little bit of research, I did a lot of research, but just a little bit of research, you'll immediately discover where he got everything from. As a child, when he was born, the first place he went was to modern day Iran. And because his dad was a merchant, and his dad would actually take him all over the place with him. And he was born, he went to modern day Iran, where there was a group of people called the Zoroastrians. And the first religion he was actually ever initiated into was Zoroastrianism. By the time he was 20, he'd been initiated into multiple religions: the Babylonian religions, the Eleusinian religion. He went to Egypt and lived there for 20 years, was initiated into the Thebes Mystery School, the Thoth Mystery School, the Sheshat Mystery School. Before he even became fully encompassed in Greek world and Greek mythology, he had already been incorporated into all these ancient religions. And the Pythagoreans, the Babylonians actually have a tablet that has the mathematical equations of the Pythagorean theorem that he discovered, and basically took it back to Greece. So what he did wasn't discover stuff. He traveled the whole world. He got all these pieces of information on music, harmonics, and mathematics, and then he presented it in one form that became a practical way to implement it and create society.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's not like he just came up with it and dumped it out there, and it was the moment. How many times do we create things and nobody listens for a long time?
Like, here's a trip. Let me tell you just this piece of information. So the Pythagorean theorem, right? If you get the 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau, okay, and you line them up, one at the bottom, one on the side, one at the top, the triangle, the Pythagorean triangle, is right there. They even created the pyramids in a way that if you line them up together, it literally creates the Pythagorean theorem. And there is And the symbol of those pyramids put together, which are square blocks put together, is actually one of the symbols of the Masons, which is a direct reference to Pythagoras, which is a direct reference to ancient Egypt. But a lot of the elite, they actually worship Pythagoras. He's kind of like the original Mason, the individual that came up with all these equations and mathematical awareness that they then hijacked and utilized for themselves in order to create society through the Roman Empire and beyond. But it's a direct connection to really his awareness. And so some people think that Pythagoras was an elitist and he was basically part of the secret society order, but he was 100% anti-elitism. His whole efforts and what he was doing was trying to take down the whole concept of hierarchy. However, when he passed away, people took his information and started using it for their own personal gain.
Building these things, building the pyramids in this shape, I mean, that's not easy. What purpose would it serve to do that?
Yeah. So from like the research I've done recently just for this presentation, I already knew Egypt was like incredible, but my mind is completely blown. If everything on Earth is basically scratched and we're just like trying to figure it out again, and Egypt and the structure still stayed there, just by measuring the distance between these pyramids and the location of specific areas in relation to other structures, not just the pyramids, but temples, is literally the mathematics of everything you need to know to recreate society, including the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau. All the stones in the Giza Plateau are the exact same light years to the Sirius star system, right? So, and then also if you measure the whole circumference of the Giza Plateau and then multiply it with 432, which is a number that we also see somewhere else in relation to the distance between one of the temples and the pyramid, you get the circumference of the Earth, right? So they have all these mathematical equations just embedded, not in just the Giza Plateau, but all over the place. It really takes a level of extreme genius to be able to do that. So he took a lot of his information. He was there for 20 years, okay? So some people say 10 years to 20 years, but those are still a long time. And pretty much most of his information came from studying the distances between it all. And at that point, when he was in Egypt, it wasn't like forgotten information at that point. The people were still there teaching the information. He took it and he passed it down to future generations.
Do we assume that he knew or that he was just discovering it?
So he was definitely, so there's multiple things. He definitely found a lot of information. Pretty much all the mainstream information that he came across came with, including the musical interval. The musical intervals and the frequencies of each harmonic and octave, right, from the Western music scale directly comes from Egypt. And there's a guy called Sacred G Decoded on YouTube, in which I got a lot of my research from for that, where he shows it all. But then at the same time, the Pythagoreans, they were experimenting with psychedelics, they were doing mantras, and they were taking different herbs that they believed would unlock parts of their brain. So they were also in deep meditation. And there's also stories about Pythagoras in Egypt taking psychedelics and visiting different ancient sites and connecting to star beings, to extraterrestrials. So I think that it's an accumulation of a lot of things. Much of it came from ancient civilizations, but he was very much interested in being able to unlock his own consciousness to see what kind of information he could download.
If all this information is out there, why are more people not aware of it? Is there active efforts to repress it, or or has it just been put in a light where it's hard for people to believe? Has it been, a smear campaign?
At first, before I did this presentation, I would have thought that maybe it was going to be very hard to find all this information, but it was so extremely easy to come across it all. So it's a Google search away, and people just don't have the time for it, is where it's at right now. And also, spirituality and mathematics were one and the same during Pythagoras' time. But then 500 years later, Christianity started, and then 300 years later, Christianity became the Roman Empire's main religion. As that occurred, they started also moving away from logic and started going hardcore into belief and faith. And then you see around 300 to 400 AD, you start seeing a split of spirituality and logic. Then you get to the 1400s, you get to Descartes, you get to Galileo, you get to Kepler, and you start realizing that there was this whole movement against religion, against the church, because of how disharmonic the institutions were. So now you see Pythagoreanism, but you see it without spirituality because of their trauma with organized religion. Then that continues to grow, right? For another 500 years till 1900. And then in the 1900, you get Albert Einstein, you get Tesla, and you get Max Planck, right? All very spiritual individuals that believed in consciousness and believed that the universe, as we started expanding our awareness more and more, the individuals in the 1900s started realizing that there was a spiritual component to it all. So what occurred is there was definitely an ignorance level because of the Yuga cycle that we're in. And then there was a split. Christianity had a lot to do with us disconnecting spirituality from mathematics.
But on a science level, like scientists, like mainstream science, are they aware? That's what I'm wondering. Is there like or is it just too far-fetched for them?
You mean aware of what? Like all the spiritual stuff that Pythagoras?
The importance of Pythagoras in.
Well, they definitely are aware because they believe the Pythagorean theorem was his discovery. And that's just one thing. Of course, the musical scale and musical intervals, plus one of the main things where Pythagoras theorized that something called the music of the spheres, that he thought that every single planet had its own frequency, and that if you were into space, you would hear a symphony of different sounds. Well, now in the last years or so, we've been able to go out into space, and a lot of these individuals hold him in high reverence, but they don't realize all the spiritual aspect of it all. They just look at it completely from a linear perspective that isn't about the consciousness, that everything is vibration and frequency. And a good example is quantum physics. Quantum physics is literally showing us that we're all vibration and frequency. And every single ancient text has something like, in the beginning was the word, the vibration in the beginning. Are these scientists sitting there and being like, whoa, we've now discovered that everything is frequency, and every one of these origin stories literally talks about vibration? None of them saying this. People like myself and other speakers are talking about it. So I think the scientist has gone down such a route of atheism that spirituality isn't even a thing that they think about in this moment. However, a lot of people that are finding out the quantum world, that we're all vibration and frequency, are starting to discover that it's a spiritual component, but they don't really have the foundation from it all, So some people, yes, but I've noticed that most people that are on the mainstream, the conventional individuals, still come from a concept of atheism when it comes down to Pythagorean information.
Is there a ticking clock on when we should be able to do this? Because at the beginning of our discussion, we're talking about Nibiru in this orbit. Should we be there by the time of its return, or is that even a factor? Is that even anything we need to worry about?
Some people have said,
maybe not worry, but be aware of. Is it something we need? Yeah.
Well, the day the Nibiru was supposed to return has already gone. Like a lot of people, but then what happens is there are many people that be like, oh, well, we had the date wrong. It's in a few years from now, right? So I'm not about dates at all. And I'm just about living in the moment and trying to teach people the tools to do so. And then there's a lot of people, including some scriptures that allude to Nibiru actually exploded. And then there's individuals that think that we are in a binary star system, and Nibiru is actually rotating around a red dwarf, which is a dormant, basically a fizzled out star that our sun is currently rotating around. So these are the different theories. I only present the theories because no one knows the actual truth. Now, in regards to worrying about it coming back, our planet has been around for quite some time. And if Nibiru existed, it's come across many, many times. And if the reality is that they actually came to the Earth every time that it came around, well, the Earth obviously didn't get destroyed. They came here and they mined gold, right? So I don't think that we're in store for any cataclysm when it comes to Nibiru. Most of my focus is more on just the evolution of consciousness. And this story of Nibiru is just one of many stories of our ancient history. There's other stories of our galactic origins. So either we were seeded one time and all these stories of different origin stories of humanity are the same story, but with different names of these beings, or this has happened many times, that there's been a recycling and a reset of humanity on Earth, and different star beings have come here in order to experiment with us.
So if we want to start expanding our consciousness, how does one start? I'm obviously I know very little about it. On its, I do try to meditate, but I was dealing with stress at work and started doing mindful meditation. I found that it was helpful. So how does a guy like me get started?
Well, I would say that, meditation is good, but ultimately, what is the consciousness evolution? It's really getting to a place where we release a lot of traumas, because we come from a place of trauma and emotional triggers. We respond to people and we react very quickly. We can get triggered and offended very easily. And most of those come from our traumas, many of which come from our childhood, right? Some of which can be argued come from our past lives. So I would say tools and techniques that allow us to release traumas so we can be more present and have joy within. The more joy you cultivate within yourself, not excitement. Excitement is something external to you that makes you happy and excited. Joy is something that's internal, that's just this happiness that comes from you. And I would say that, being a traumatized kid myself that went through some really traumatic experiences that dimmed my light and made it that I wasn't able to be joyful, doing things that allowed me to release those allowed me to be at a state where I basically have reverence for myself, love for myself and others. So to be like more concise, I'm going all over the place here. Inner joy, cultivating inner joy, loving yourself unconditionally to a point where you can love others and not being emotionally triggered by others is the first step to evolving our consciousness. It's not about external information. It's not about escapism and trying to get somewhere into a point of enlightenment so that you can feel some inner peace. It's about doing the work. And part of the work is releasing what no longer serves us. And many of those things are traumas. As a child, I was molested as a child. It literally screwed me over, and it took me my whole life to basically release those traumas. Most of my experiences came from my traumas as a child. I went to multiple plant medicine ceremonies, and I also went to 10-day vipassanas, which are 10-day silent meditation retreats. And those things right there were the tools that I utilized that helped me release my traumas and get to a point where I started evolving my consciousness.
My wife tells me, my wife is very in touch with her feelings, and she's a social worker. She helps kids find housing, and she tells me that I have a lot of behaviors that are the behaviors of somebody with like childhood trauma, and that I need to fix that. I mean, not for her, but for me. And I don't really remember any childhood trauma. So I've often thought about this, like, how does one fix childhood trauma that maybe they don't remember? I'm adopted.
Yes.
Maybe that was traumatic. I don't know.
Yeah, man.
But how do you fix
it's so
those things that might not? Well, here's a prime example. You said some of them might come from your past life. How do you even get there to figure out, how to fix that?
So those are deep traumas that can be released through maybe psychedelic experience, maybe like the 10-day silent meditation retreat that I did was more powerful than any plant medicine psychedelic experience I've ever had, because you're basically in your own consciousness meditating 8 hours a day at this retreat center. And after a few days, what happens is when you don't have stimuli, right? When you're not
this is no talking.
Yeah, no talking. So after the third day, your subconscious mind, right, which is your unconscious mind, and your conscious mind meld together. What happens is, this is the science behind it, is your conscious mind is so occupied with your daily tasks that unless your conscious mind takes a break, all of those memories that you don't remember, including your past lives that are unlocked in your unconscious mind, aren't able to come to the forefront to get dealt with. So when you do these experiences, for example, ayahuasca, scientifically proven, connects both your unconscious and your conscious mind together, right? Everything pours out. All those experiences, those visuals are literally things that you might even be seeing like a dragon, but it's literally working out a trauma that you don't even know what it really is. When you do the Vipassana on the third day, you're all of a sudden, because you're not focused on cooking for yourself. You're not focused on washing your dishes. All that's done for you. All of a sudden, your unconscious mind plugs right into your conscious mind, and all these emotions and experiences start bleeding through. You're breathing through it. You're meditating through it. They start releasing it. The Vipassana style meditation retreat is actually Buddha's original technique, and it's the technique he actually utilized to achieve enlightenment, which was a releasing of trauma. So that's just two different things. There's theta healing. There's actually sound frequency machines now that allow those that same kind of experience to happen. So there are many ways. Some people, they just need to meditate for 30 minutes a day and breathe through it, and then it helps them to release that. So you don't really need to remember exactly what the issues are. There's trigger therapy, in which basically you're doing certain techniques, and all of a sudden your body is convulsing in certain areas, literally releasing trauma from your cellular memory that could be this life and past life. So there are many ways without having to remember in order to release.
From what you're saying, it sounds like technology, at least in my case, is potentially hurting us, because even outside of doing ayahuasca, being a tribal ancient person, you have a lot of time to yourself, a lot of time to your subliminal mind, like you're saying. You have a lot of quiet. And just me solely being surrounded by these screens. I have 4 open in front of me right now. It seems like technology might be hurting us just purely on an attention level.
Yeah, and the fact is that everything is vibration and frequency. There are disharmonic frequencies and there's harmonic frequencies. But because we live in a future where we are not being conscious of the fact that everything is vibration and some of it can actually hurt us, we're creating technology without attempting to make it harmonic, right? But we could use the same thing. We can use radio waves in a harmonic way. We can use Wi-Fi signals in a harmonic way. But because it's not mainstream, they just create it, and it's all about the end result. Transferring data, getting a signal. It's all about that, not about the fact that we are vibratory beings. All this frequency goes through our body and affects us as well. So what needs to happen is we need to become aware of it, because it's not just about technology. It's about technology being utilized unconsciously, including the way we create this stuff.
Yeah, that opens up like this whole world of weird potential dangers. Like are we affected by the vibrations that we get day to day? Like I could listen to a song, it could be a happy song, but the vibrations themselves could be hurtful.
Yes.
When somebody plays guitar, are those vibrations affecting us?
Yeah, so everything affects us, because we're basically this is a quote from a scientist, I forget her name right now, but we're basically like a tuning fork. We are the piano. When we think we're playing the guitar is actually playing us, because the frequency is actually playing with our chords. There's two things there.
That's interesting. Yeah.
There is the frequency of the actual thing that could actually affect you in a negative way, but then there's also the emotional feeling that can affect you in a positive way. So if you hear some music and sound and you feel really good about it because you have this connection to that music, even if the harmonic frequency isn't completely harmonized, you could still get a benefit from it. That's how powerful we are. That's called transmutation. You can transmute any frequency. There are harmonic frequencies, and some people go into like 440 is disharmonic, 432 is harmonic, right? And but then it's also your own consciousness, whatever you feel about it. Some musicians subliminally put frequencies in the background of the music that are known to actually create harmony within the body, and then that gives you the more uplifting effect. So sometimes you feel these frequencies and these vibrations, you feel really good about the song, but you aren't even aware that actually subliminally in the background is an actual tone that affects you positively. So it's kind of both, really. It could be your emotional state. Your emotional state can shift anything if you feel great about it. You can listen to hardcore heavy metal, drop D music, right? And literally just like release all your energy, right? Dance it out because you had anxiety all day. Now you feel great. So there's no real blanket statement for that.
I don't know where I heard this. I think I just heard it as a quote in a movie, but it kind of fits what we're talking about here. That the Ionian Scale, which is like the root the root of the major scale. So if you go up the major scale, that's the Ionian position. And that was the ancient Greeks thought that scale would drive you mad. Mm-hmm. But all of our pop songs are written in that scale. Is there, have you ever heard this, or am I just pulling this from something?
Well, Pythagoras was an Ionian philosopher. So are you saying the Ionian scale being the scale that he utilized?
Well, so the major scale has a mode for each note in it. If the first mode is called Ionian, so it's Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian. I forget the order, but Ionian's the first one. And so I was wondering if there was any truth to a scale of music that would make you go mad, and it seems to fit.
There is a lot of people that believe that. I haven't done enough research to go into it. And some people change their, the tuning of their instruments specifically not to be in alignment with that scale because they think that it creates more harmony, right?
Right.
And then there's individuals like my friend Torquem G that synthesizes 432 hertz, and he synthesizes the different tones of these scales and does videos showing people how different ones are not harmonic and ones are harmonic, So the information's out there, but in regards to making you mad, I don't know. But I do know that there are some musicians that deliberately put frequencies in their music to inspire certain primal behaviors to keep us from having inner peace.
Oh, to keep us from having inner peace.
Yeah. And that goes into the music industry and the music industry's agenda, which isn't really about creating harmony and peace, but there are some out there that want us to drink more, want us to party more, want us to live a wild lifestyle. And there are frequencies that will actually inspire that within you.
Is the motivation behind that money, I assume?
The motivation behind it is creating a superficial capitalistic society based on instant gratification. Based on instant gratification. And not dealing with our traumas, but utilizing substances and other things in order to release anxiety rather than actually do the inner work. So Crazy Bone, which is a guy from Bone Thugs and Harmony, he was in an executive meeting as a really famous hip hop band from the 90s. And he was
I'm from the 90s as well.
He was in a meeting, right, with Sony executives. And they literally came to this meeting, and the whole entire meeting and there was a non-disclosure agreement. All these executives had to sign it. And so he only released this 2 years ago because the non-disclosure agreement expired. And they literally were coming up and brainstorming with ideas to instigate and initiate aggression through rap music. That was what the meeting was with Sony executives, right? So whether they came up with, and he released a letter on his podcast and all this stuff, but whether they the non-disclosure agreement, whether they came up with frequencies or whether they were coming up with what words to use, right? They were deliberately attempting to hijack a certain type of music in order to promote more of aggressive lifestyle.
Yeah, it's just why? What does that help? Who does that help?
Well, then if you talk about 90s rap music, Black people,
I guess so.
Racism, there's too many factors there to know the truth, but you definitely know something's up.
We seem to be so inundated with negativity. Do our feelings create the vibe? Is that part of, at the beginning of our discussion, I had asked you, how does the global consciousness go down? Is that sort of how this happens?
So the negativity, yeah, for sure. As we are in lower ages, the way it goes is that there's more people that are ignorant to the truth. There's more delusion in the world, which creates more of a confusion. In a delusional world, the things that do not support us and make us feel good, we give credit and energy towards, right? As we go higher in ages, it shifts. There's still a little bit of delusion, but the things that really kind of support us in living an empowered, harmonious, and compassionate lifestyle becomes basically the most common thing. So on the grand scheme of it all, the negativity was supposed to happen because it gives us the contrast of having these experiences of darkness so that we can transcend into some light awareness. But then on the idea of the third dimensional awareness of that, are we creating this negativity for ourselves? Well, the way it works is it's a fractal. Whatever you put out there, you get more of. The universe isn't like a parent that says to you, oh, you do all these bad things, let me give you some good things. The universe is just one big Xerox machine. It just reflects to you more of what you put out there. So if you put out negativity, you create a downward fractal for yourself that you keep getting that back. If you create positivity for your life, you're going to get more and more experiences, synchronicities of why you want that. So the reason why we're such a hole of negativity is because we've been putting it out there for so long. But now if you talk about the elite and the governments that literally cultivate and market fear to the masses, and humans are at such a level of being so docile that we're able to accept and own this fear as our own, it literally creates a world where we're at such a lower vibration because we're in so much fear. Right. So not only are we creating it ourselves, the negativity is perpetuating or fractalizing back to us, but then we have organizations and groups that deliberately want to keep us in fear so that they can maintain control.
Let's talk a bit about your website, Portal to Ascension. How do you help people?
So Portal to Ascension started in 2006, 2008. I changed the name to Portal to Ascension. We're basically a conscious event production organization. I started with a few events a month, but now we do around 110 events a year on a range of conscious topics. About 40% of our events are rediscovering our ancient history. Like, for example, we have a whole entire conference on Sumer and Mesopotamia coming up in February. And then we do conferences, 3-day conferences on UFOs, extraterrestrials, sacred sexuality, spirit, all types of spirituality, self-empowerment, sound healing. So it's a one-stop shop for consciousness. In regards to, the bottom line is to empower the individual to remember who they are. And through that, we go through hundreds, if not thousands, of different topics that lead to that same truth of remembrance. The ancient history component I love the most because when we talk about our true history, we start discovering a lot of hidden truths. And then within that, you also have the concept of UFOs and extraterrestrials, and you also have the awareness of the spiritual level that these ancient beings were at. So as I said, around 40% of it really does delve into ancient history topics, but then the rest of it is pretty much everything else we can think of. Any concept I thought of, like, for example, the physics of the universe, 2-day conference on quantum reality and the physics of the universe and how it connects to consciousness, right? So at this point, I've created around 3,000 plus conferences, webinars, retreats, tours, and we have over 10,000 hours of footage on our website. And if someone signs up at portaltoascension.org, there's immediately 3,000 hours of free presentations on a range of topics, and every single month we keep adding more. So throughout the year, you can sign up. We do like a handful of free events. Most of our events are paid events. And then we have about 3,000 free hours of presentations. But people can sign up to attend live conferences, webinars, come to a live event, come to a retreat, and then they can watch it back. So our website is kind of like a Netflix for consciousness in that aspect as well.
What does one of your events look like?
So let's say we have the workshop. So a lot of us, 60% of our events are individual workshops and webinars, right? For example, we just did an event with William Henry called Eden Restored. And it was basically looking at and dissecting the revelations in the Bible and taking some truths out of it from where it came from and directly connecting that to the fifth dimensional experience and how this came from even ancient knowledge that had to do with extraterrestrials, right? So he did a 3-hour event on that 2 weeks ago, and people sign up and attend, they watch it, they get the replay. But then 40% of our events are multi-day conferences or all-day conferences, 10 hours a day, 3 days, 10 hours a day, panel discussions at the end. Those are more like mission-oriented, hardcore energy events because people are there with us for 8 to 10 hours throughout the day. We have 5 or 6 presenters. We have a panel discussion at the end. We have music sometimes on the event, and it's just nonstop, nonstop download after download, mind-blowing information after mind-blowing information. on a lot of the events, and then some of them are experience-oriented events where it's not so much about the intellectual information, but about how to integrate it, tools and techniques in order to basically, be at a meditative state. So our events are, all over the place in regards to experiences, but it's fun. It's like attending a live conference, because we've created this online university that makes it in a way that you actually feel like you're there in person. So you're engaging with other attendees, you get to speak to the speakers, you get to ask questions, all that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been really, I can't help but to use the word enlightening. It's been enlightening, and a lot of fun. I enjoy ancient history. Ancient history is without a doubt my favorite topic, because I can't imagine a world where Sumer was the first civilization, and in a conservative science basically says humanity's about 200,000 years old, 150 to 200,000 years old, and even if you go with that, that's a long time for nobody to build some sort of city or civilization. So I'm constantly interested in that. And then plus I have to admit, I loved a movie when I was a kid called Fire and Ice. It was an animated movie. It was done with rotoscoping. Okay. And it's like this prehistory sort of story. And I've always thought, like, man, that was so cool. So, so I am always down for a topic on prehistory, and I hope you come on again sometime, and maybe we can dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you having me.
All right, thank you very much. You've been listening to Neil Gaur here, and if you want to find out more, don't forget to check out portal2ascension.org.